Hey there, guys. Hey, I know I talked about something pretty similar a couple of days ago, but I'm still sort of on the kick of looking at what kind of other replays are out there. You can find some good ones online. You can find some online that are maybe not quite as good. But in the archives of the old newsletters, all the stuff that people don't want anymore and throw away and stuff, for me at least, that's where you find some of the gems, and that's really where you find stuff that can inspire you for your next project. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and just jump into this one. As you can see, once again, we're looking at the APBA journal. This is from July 1992. This is still the Howard Alshkog era. If you don't believe me, you can just look here. Editor and publisher Howard Alshkog, with Art Springsteen working as special assistant, right? And some of these guys, we know about Robert Henry, right? And the writing staff, we've talked about him before. Don Zminda, I actually contacted once on Twitter. He was one of the founders of Stats Incorporated. Some of these, like Eric Naftali, who I think has commented on these videos before. Eric, of course, was later APBA Journal publisher when Howard had to finally lay down the reins. We'll talk more about Howard Alshkog and what he did for the APBA Journal at a later point in time. His era is it is indisputably the best era of the magazine. It's funny because I think my dad back around here in the early 90s probably thought fondly on the old days of Ben Weiser in the mid 70s. The truth is that this period of time, the starting with probably 84 up through the end of 1992 is the best period of time for the APBA Journal. There's so much stuff in here, I don't even know where to begin. A lot of good stuff, and impressive not only for a publication, like a fan publication for simulation sports, but this stuff is better than the threads that you see oftentimes on tabletop sports. So we'll go over here first and look at the APBA replays. Right. You can see a lot of these follow the same convention I talked about last time. Here's 1985, and at least this one sort of has a pennant race explanation, but we just get in really quickly to, here's what happened with each team in the East and in the West and so on and so forth in the National League. But now this is the one I wanted to get to. So Rick Erickson of New Orleans, if you're still out there, Rick, congratulations, because you won. You won my heart with your write-up of this replay. He used 1908 National League replay with the old CMBA pitching grades. I won't get into the CMBA pitching grades right now. If you know, you know. If you don't know, don't worry about it yet. We'll get to that eventually, because there's a lot of explaining that has to go on first. He talks about how the replay, this single league replayed took him from October 1990 to February 1992, played about 40 games a month. I'm not sure if my 1908 replay will finish in, 1.5 years. So at first I was going to say, I can beat that pace. Now I'm like, maybe not. Now, the thing I love about this is that he talks about his methodology, right? He talks about all sorts of innovations. I'm interested in the stats for the sake of the game, not the game for the sake of the stats. The thinking is that accurate stats reflect fidelity in the game situation, right? He expects performances to fall within the norms of the player era and blah, blah, blah. I can swallow Roger Maris hitting 63 home runs, but not 78. We can argue about that at a different time. He talks about what he does to research the season. Imagine that you actually research a season before you play it. He read The Unforgettable Season, which I've read. It's been years since I've last read it. I should probably read it again. He read Pitching in a Pinch, which I've read as well, but that's also been years. I haven't read that for 20 years. He read some things that were relevant in Bill James, which is another thing I'd like to get back towards, and then read a bunch of New York Times microfilm. Had his own injury system, then dropped it and followed real-life injuries instead after a while. Found that 22 players per team was adequate for most teams except for the Cardinals, Reds, and the Doves, so half the teams. Good job. Tried to follow usage close to real life and so on and so forth, and then he used that pitching system. I love the fact that he goes through all of this, right? And then he talks about stuff he was using in the master game and gets into your C11, E14 Steelers, and so on and so forth. We won't talk too much about that right now, right? But the fact that the thing I love so much about this is that he starts off by talking about this stuff and by sort of showing not only the replay as, how each team did, but talks about the replay as part of the project. And you can see the care and the love and the thought that went into this. That's the thing that I love the most. I love reading this and thinking about, how he was handling base stealing and how he handled his own fielding randomizations and stuff. Now, he does something here that I think is really controversial, right? He played 100 games or so and noticed that the offense was off kilter, right? So I've played 100 and I think it's 160 games now in 1908, right? But of course, he's only playing one league, so he's a little bit further along in his replay than I am currently in mine. And he noticed that, yeah, Wagner's hitting over 500. A bunch of guys are over 320, right? I love this part right here. Now, I should point out here that the common image of 1908 as a year of 1-0 ball games is not wholly accurate. Well, we know that, right? For a team to register 12 hits a game, particularly the Giants, was not unusual. The average number of runs scored per team per game was up around 3.3, and in one real-life doubleheader at the Polo Grounds, the Giants and Boston Doves combined to score 35 runs. So I was expecting some heavy offense from time to time, and then he says, no, it looked more like 1922. That's all about CNBA stuff, right, what that's all about. But this part right here tells me that Rick did his homework. He understands what happened. He really took a look at this, right? I'm telling you, you go talk with baseball guys on Twitter or on a message board or on Facebook or whatever. I can't tell you how many people who consider themselves to be like intelligent people who understand sabermetrics and blah, 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 don't understand this point, right? It's the same thing when we talk about 1930. The fact that batting averages were high, on-base percentages were higher, and so on doesn't mean that everybody hit 350 and was driving in 100 runs. It's just not true, right? There were reasons why that happened. Anyway, he got his pennant race. All at 1.5 clubs were within 4.5 games of the top, with 2 tied for first, but he got to that point on July 7th. And the Cubs had a 21-game winning streak and pulled it on forward. This is a very, very well written replay. And in the end, the Cubs ended up dominating, of course, winning by 8 games and led the rest of the way. The results were close and plausible. He talks more about the CNBA system and so on. And then he has his things for the APBA Journal for the things that they put in. Pretty simple, right? But this is the thing that I really, really like. The reason why I like that sort of thing in a replay is that instead of just jumping straight over to what the results were, he tells us about it, and it's got sort of a human element. You know, I don't know what he looks like, right? But in my mind's eye, I can see this guy going to the library and spending hours there using the microfilm machine to look at the New York Times archives and looking through the stories of games and taking notes and noting down things that were really interesting that he didn't know about before. Remember, this is before you had Baseball Reference or RetroSheet, right? So he couldn't go on the internet. There was really no internet. This is 1992. He couldn't go on to the internet and spend all of his time just looking at box scores. He couldn't go look at the league splits and, you know, all that other stuff that I like to mess around with. This is 1992, right? He has to go make this stuff up on his own. He can't get the real life lineups for every game because not every one of these players is carded. He's got to do something else to make it realistic, but also make sure that the replay is his own, right? And all of this is sort of chasing after that elusive, you know, pennant race that he's hoping emerges that in the end doesn't because the Cubs end up dominating the league. Very, very interesting stuff. And I love the way that it's presented. And it makes me think, man, like I said, I could see myself doing this. I could see myself doing this research. And wouldn't it be fascinating to learn more about this era and to have an actual understanding of it rather than just having this general understanding? This seems a lot more interesting to me than going online as we do these days and fighting with people over, you know, the stupidest things and the stupidest ideology part of baseball statistics. Instead of fighting about it, let's go play it ourselves and we'll talk about our replays and talk about what we came up with and talk about whether it matters or not. You know, that's a lot more fun. It's a lot more engaging. It's a lot more interesting. Anyway, I'll save you the really long rant that would otherwise come at the end of this, but just suffice it to say that that's, I think, a really good example of a very, very good replay write-up. So if you're not, you know, if you're a little camera shy or whatever, don't feel like you have to go on YouTube or whatever. You know what I feel of how I feel about the message boards. I prefer having my blog and doing it sort of myself. But if you must do message boards, then do message boards. But just keep this in mind. At least for me as a reader, I want to read not about what the result was and about what the stats were, because I don't care about stats generation. I want to know how it was for you. I want to know what your replay was like and how you felt about it and what you liked and what you didn't like. And, you know, what parts were frustrating for you and what parts were awesome for you. What parts did you think were just absolutely out of this world? That's the thing that I'm interested in. And I think that there are other people out there who are like that. Love to know what you think. Let me know down below. Talk to you later. Bye.